All right. UFC Fight Night, Duncan versus Moicano is upon us, and we have quite possibly the least stacked card in UFC history. We got ourselves a lot of fights to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. Starting from the first fight, we got Kai Kamaka versus Dakota Hope. Banger of a fight to start off, I know. Now, honestly, I don't really know much about either of these guys. But if I were to pick just looking at them, I am leaning towards Kai Kamaka. He actually has a record in the UFC. He's beaten a couple guys. Dakota Hope does have a decent record, but just based off the level of competition, Kai Kamaka has fought tougher guys. He's been in the UFC longer, a little more experienced. I'm leaning towards him just based off being able to probably edge out a gritty decision. So I'm picking Kai Kamaka. We move on. Next card in the fight, Diane Barboza versus Melissa Gatto. Now, Melissa Gatto hasn't been seen in a couple years. I think she's coming off a loss, while Diane Barboza, even though she's kind of a win-loss, win one, lose one kind of fighter, she, I think, is fighting tougher opponents, in my opinion. I think that she should have won that fight. I think it was Carini Silva. I believe she should have won that fight. Other than that, I think she's only lost to Miranda Maverick. She's in the top 10, so you can't really blame her. I'm going to pick Diane Barboza by decision. We move on. I can never say this guy's name. Of versus Trayshawn Gore. Now, this is some real interesting matchmaking we got going on here. We got Trayshawn Gore, who has not won a single fight in the UFC. I think he got into the UFC off of Dana White's Contender Series, off of I believe it was he the one who got the shoulder break TKO? I think it might have been this guy, but overall, I mean, he's losing to Marco Trulio, Rodolfo Vieira. The only guy that he could beat is Antonio Trocoli, who's quite possibly one of the worst guys who was ever in the UFC. And he's getting knocked out by Cody Brundage. Trayshawn Gore is just, in my opinion, not UFC level. I think that this is hilarious that they're putting him up against a guy with this type of record, 20-4. I mean, that's a veteran record right there. He's got the same height, same reach. I think that this guy's going to absolutely destroy Trayshawn Gore. Even though I don't know much about him, I mean, I don't really need to think about it too much. Should be pretty obvious. We move on. Alice Pereira versus Haley Cohen. Now, not to be confused with Alex Pereira's little sister, Eileen Pereira. Alice Pereira is 19-year-old prospect. She last fought on Noche UFC, which she lost that fight. But I think she actually didn't look that bad. I think that she kind of just had the debut jitters, maybe you could call it. Haley Cohen is just not a good fighter. She's lost both of her fights in the UFC against pretty not impressive opponents. So I'm going to go with Alice Pereira. She's young. She's attractive. Not going to think about it too hard. We're casuals over here. We're going to pick the cute girl by KO. We move on. Lando Venata versus Darius Flowers. Now, this is going to be an interesting fight, in my opinion. I believe that Darius Flowers actually missed weight. So that's going to be interesting to look at. I think that Darius Flowers, I'm not sure if he's, no, he has fought in the UFC. I believe he's the guy who's like losing to, let me check real quick. Yeah, so this guy's losing to Michael Johnson and Jake Matthews. So not a good look for Darius Flowers. Lando Venata has not been seen in a while. The thing about these kind of fighters that take long layoffs is that it's kind of hard to predict whether or not they're going to either come back and have ring rust and just look slow and look like they should have spent a little bit more time in the cage, or they end up looking better than they did before all of their injuries magically healed up. And, it's kind of tough to call these kind of fights. But I believe that even though Darius Flowers, I think that he is also 3-0 in the UFC. We got a lot of people on this card who are just losers, unfortunately. But, really think about it. Lando, he's losing to Daniel Zellhuber, which is honestly even worse than losing to Jake Matthews and Michael Johnson. I could see how Michael Johnson can be kind of a tricky opponent. Oh, I am actually kind of leaning towards Darius Flowers. I think originally I was picking Lando, but thinking about it, I mean, yeah, I just don't like the layoff. It could be good for him, but he's a little older now. I believe he's 36 years old. Long layoff. And again, he's losing to absolute scrubs. Both these guys are kind of scrubs. All right, we got the battle of the scrubs going on. Someone should invite TLC. We move on. To the next fight up the card. Alessandro Costa versus Stuart Nickel. Now, this actually should be a fun scrap. Stuart Nickel is 0-2 in the UFC, but whenever he comes in to fight, he's always looking to brawl. Entertaining fighter. But I'm actually going to pick Alessandro Costa just based off his resume. He's fought better fighters, and the fighters that he's losing to are the elite of the division, in my opinion. He's losing to guys like Steve Ercik, and he's losing to Amir Abazi, both pretty good fighters. I can't necessarily think of any impressive wins of his, but I'm picking him purely based off the experience. Hopefully, he can edge out a gritty decision. I also have seen some of his tape. The guy's a hard hitter. He's also a brawler. It should be a fun fight overall. So I'm excited for that one. We move on. This one, this fight's gonna this name's gonna really mess me up. Guilherme Pat versus Thomas Peterson. Thomas Peterson is the blobbiest of blobs. He recently got knocked out by Vitor Petrino in a pretty decent fight. Thomas Peterson is actually the betting favorite in this fight, which I find interesting. I think the idea is that Thomas Peterson is a wrestler. If he can manage to take down Pat and keep him there, then the fight is his. But the question is whether or not Pat's takedown defense will be enough. Now, Pat is 6-0 in the UFC, multiple knockouts. He is his debut. Honestly, I'm kind of leaning towards him. You know, you can watch as much tape as you want on Thomas Peterson and look at his grappling. But at the end of the day, you know, sometimes you can just kind of look at a fighter and you can kind of visualize how things are going to go. And I can visualize Guilherme Pat getting a vicious knockout over Thomas Peterson. Thomas Peterson, a bit of a blob, kind of slow in terms of the striking. He has decent wrestling and he can hang in there with some decent guys, but I just believe that he is a step below one of the more athletic heavyweights on the roster. Normally, looking at this guy's build, I would have said that I would have loved to see a matchup between Thomas Peterson and Shamil Gaziev. But it turns out they already fought before, and Shamil Gaziev got a brutal, brutal knockout. So another reason to pick against Thomas Peterson. If I were a betting man, I would take that plus money on Pat any day. We move on to the main card. We got Jose Delano versus Robert. Now, this one to me is a no-brainer. I think that Jose Delano should win this, coming off a nasty KO off of Dana White's Contender Series. I tend to lean towards these guys who are making their debut, especially a dangerous prospect like Jose Delano. He did get a pretty great, actually, no, I think he actually got a decision on the Contender Series, but I think he looked good. I believe that he should be able to beat this guy, no problem. What else was I going to say? Raluca is losing to guys like William Gomez, and I think we can all agree at this point that William Gomez is one of the more overrated prospects, especially when it comes to these Frenchies. I just do not like that he's losing to William Gomez, so I am picking Jose Delano by KO. We move on to the next fight. Tommy Guns McMillan versus Marlano Zucchini. I'm calling him Zucchini. So Zucchini boy over here, I believe he's also a William Gomez victim, if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy. Oh, no. It's the other black French guy, Morgan Charrier. Another overrated prospect, by the way. Zucchini has one fight in the UFC, losing to Morgan Charrier, while Tommy Guns McMillan is undefeated, coming off of, I believe, 8 straight submissions off of the regional scene, gets a fight on Dana White's Contender Series and gets put up against an absolute savage and actually wins that fight. He's got some cringy tattoos. He basically looks like Sean O'Malley Jr., and that's why I'm picking Tommy McMillan by industry plant KO. They gave him an absolute can, in my opinion, but we'll see. Maybe Zucchini can make things a little tricky, but I think that Tommy McMillan should be better in terms of the stand-up, in terms of the submission. I think it should be a cleaner fight than what we got in the Contender Series. So hopefully we can get a nice showcase fight for Guns to show off his skill. So I am picking Walmart, Sean O'Malley. We move on to the people's main event. All right. This is a real, you ever seen the gif of like, you know, John Cena and The Rock at WrestleMania? All right. This is the kind of matchup that we're looking at right here. We got Ethan Ewing versus Rafael Estevam. Actually a great matchup. So we got Ethan Ewing coming off of a great win in his debut off of Malcolm Wellmaker, showing up on, I believe, only a couple days' notice, was a massive underdog in that fight and actually managed to bring it to Malcolm Wellmaker. Malcolm Wellmaker basically had no answers for Ewing's relentless pressure in that fight. I really liked the way he fought. And they're giving him a really interesting fight. They're giving him an undefeated guy from flyweight who actually has a couple decent wins at flyweight. I believe he beat Charles Johnson, and he's actually coming off of a four fight. Well, actually, he's undefeated. So he's on basically an undefeated streak, but he's moving up to bantamweight and has actually missed weight again. Rafael Estevan, that is his third time missing weight out of his last four UFC fights. Not a good look for him. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Ethan Ewing. I believe that the pressure, the boxing, the footwork, I believe it's all going to be too much for Rafael Estevan. But in saying that, Ethan Ewing, I believe that he might have some trouble in the future. He is kind of a small bantamweight, and if you just look at his build, he just has a massive head, and I just feel like it would be really easy to just completely spin his jaw. But we'll get to there when we get there. I don't think he's getting knocked out tonight. I'm picking Ethan Ewing by decision. It should be a lock. We move on. Abdul Rahman, these Turkish guys, man. Holy crap. Abdul Rahman Yakimev versus Brendan Ribeiro. Another insane matchup. All right. The matchmakers are basically giving you free money on this fight because there's almost no way in hell that Brendan Ribeiro wins this fight. Brendan Ribeiro isn't even supposed to be in the UFC. He was put up against an absolute monster in his Dana White Contender Series debut, was supposed to get knocked out, almost did get finished, ends up getting the TKO, gets the contract, has strung together a couple of decent wins, I believe. Wait, no, actually, I'm completely wrong. He's actually lost a couple of his fights. This was actually the guy who ended up getting that wild TKO, I believe, with the shoulder injury. So again, he wasn't even supposed to win that fight. Ends up winning by TKO, basically a fluke, freak injury that happened. Has lost his last two fights against pretty decent opponents. Last guy he fought was Omar Sy. Screw that guy. Sold one of my parlays. Never forgive him for that. And I think before that, he lost against Azmat Mirzakhanov, which is really nothing to be upset about at all. He's a really good fighter. In saying that, Brendan Ribeiro is basically a jobber, unfortunately. And they're putting him up against an absolute monster in Abdul. I don't know how to say this guy's name, no matter how hard I try. I get him confused with the other Abdul. I don't know what it is with these Turkish guys naming their kids Abdul. Very popular name. But I will go with Mr. Abdul Rahman. 8-0 should be a no-brainer. I believe that he should be able to get this done by KO. We move on to the next fight. Vienna Jandiroba versus Tabitha Ricci. Now, my question is, who the hell is Tabitha Ricci? I mean, most of these women and the smaller weight classes, I kind of just get them all confused. Tabitha Ricci, Amanda Hebos, all basically the same woman, in my opinion. I believe that Tabitha Ricci is actually coming off of a KO over Amanda Hebos, which is pretty decent. But I'm still going to pick Veranda Jandiroba. Like I said earlier, we're casuals here. We may have watched a few clips, but you don't have to watch tape to figure out how this fight's going to go. All you need to do is look into the crooked, lazy eye of Veranda Jandiroba to tell that she's going to win this fight via tough cookie decision. Tabitha Ricci, she's probably a tough girl. You know, I was on a decent winning streak, but I believe that the competition that she's fighting are levels and levels below Veranda Jandiroba. I saw her fight Yan Zhao Nan in Miami, which was pretty sick. A little bit of a boring fight, but the girls that she is fighting are on a much, much higher level than the people that Tabitha Ricci is fighting. So I think it should be pretty obvious Veranda Jandiroba by decision. We move on to the main event, Renato Moicano versus Chris Duncan. Now, we all know that financially motivated Renato Moicano is probably the most dangerous mythical fighter that there is. But this one is another fight where I think it's a lock. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go against my brother Renato, and I'm picking Chris Duncan. I'm actually picking him to finish the fight in either rounds 3 or 4. I believe that Chris Duncan is actually great in terms of his stand-up. It's pretty underrated. His ground game has been proven to be really good. And obviously his best attribute is his toughness. I mean, this guy is tough as nails. He does not back down. He does not get wobbled easily. I don't think that Renato Moicano can have enough pop in his shots to get any type of respect out of Chris Duncan. I believe Chris Duncan is going to do what he does best. He's going to move forward. He's going to zombie his way towards Hanato Moicano. Hanato may get a takedown. He may have some success on the ground. But like I said, Chris Duncan, he is too tough to be submitted, too tough to be wobbled or ground and pounded. But MMA is weird. Hanato does have that win over Benoit Saint-Denis. That particular night, he had probably the perfect game plan that you could ask for when fighting a guy like BSD. So the question is whether or not he can come out with an excellent game plan. We know that Hanato does have good fight IQ. He can make this tricky, but again, it's one of those things where you don't got to overthink it. Hanato Moicano is out here losing to Benil Dariush in the big 26. I believe that was 25 actually when they had that fight, but not a good look. Losing to old man Benil Dariush. Nato looked a bit slow in that fight in terms of the striking. So I can actually see Chris Duncan getting the TKO on the feet. Oh, we're looking for that. I believe it's going to be fireworks in the main event. Overall, a fun fight, but I'm not sure if it's exactly main event worthy. But then again, I guess that's just an average Apex fight night. Anyways, next week, we got a big pay-per-view coming up, Yuri Prohaska versus Carlos Olberg in Miami. It's going to be an absolute sick card, and I will have my predictions ready for next week. So be there.